All right, hey everybody. I'm here with M2 Anas, who's one of our superstars on the research front and in general. He has gracefully volunteered and agreed to share his perspective on what it was like to do a time-intensive summer research experience in the summer between M1 and M2, which I know is a big decision a lot of M1s will be thinking through in the coming months. Thanks for your time, Anas. Can you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. As Dr. Sim said, I'm an M2. Um, I'm from the Lexington area, so I am pretty familiar. And in terms of specialty interests, at this moment, I'm leaning pretty heavily into ophthalmology. Um, and yeah, that's the basics about me.
And I have to give you a shout out because I remember talking with you before you even began medical school. You were already thinking about how to get involved, really planning ahead to make sure you could juggle things well during M1 year. At what point did you decide, hey, I'm going to go do one of these big time commitment, full time summer programs?
I once I was beginning to kind of dip my toes into searching on the internet and things like that a few months into M1 fall, but I'd say around like October is when I really began to scour and think seriously about spending my summer doing research.
You're interested in ophthalmology, which is a pretty small specialty. So we have research here. I think you were already involved as an M1 with some of the UK com ophthalmology. A lot of times I hear from M1s who say, there's not a big formal project in an area I'm interested in or a big formal program. What made you decide I'm going to do a big national Google search? I'm sure that took a lot of time. What made you decide to do that instead of maybe a smaller project or a shorter term project here in Lexington?
Um, Part of the motivation was once I had a good understanding of what the different summer programs offered, especially the PSMRF. I kind of compared that to some of the other programs, and in addition to research, I found that they weren't necessarily totally focused on ophthalmology, but they also offered education in areas like diabetes or obesity or other things that we're going to encounter as clinicians. Um, and I also thought it would be really nice to travel a little bit for the summer, go somewhere where I hadn't been. So I looked into that as well.
That's awesome. So tell me more about how many things did you apply for? How did you find them? Are you literally going to Google and saying summer research for med students? What's that process like? And it sounds like that was happening kind of at the midpoint of M1 year. Is that right?
That's right. And that's pretty much exactly what I did. Summer research opportunities for M1 students. Surprisingly, that field is even way more open than it is for undergrads. And there's only so many medical students out there. So I went through like maybe like the first 3 or 4 pages of Google search, tried to note down everything I thought was reasonable, when deadlines would be, when they would, how much in terms of whether they require recommendation letters or not, how many different like essay submissions they might require. Kind of compared them all to see what's the amount of work required to apply for something versus how well do I fit for something. And I only ended up applying to about 3 or 4 of those opportunities after kind of weighing all of that. So yeah, I did do a pretty careful like search in that terms though. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that it's doable. I know a lot of times students don't necessarily feel like they can just jump out on the internet and find something. But every year we have students who find amazing opportunities. It sounds like it was a good experience. Before we get into it, tell me a little bit more for the students who are worried about when to start spending time on research or finding research during M1. They're worried if I start spending a couple of hours a week applying for things or doing projects, and then I struggle academically, how do I know that I'm ready? How were you balancing that? Did you wait till your grades were at a certain point, you were through certain courses, were you just doing it on lighter days, or how did you balance that time commitment during the really busy M1 year?
Yeah, M1 year is certainly busy. I definitely waited till around the end of foundations before considering looking into research opportunities, which comes to around the end of that first semester of M1. And I also, when I felt like I had like the creative energy to work on some of those applications, create those pieces to make me, those like essay pieces to make me appealing, I took advantage of that. And kind of what you're saying with like lighter days and when I felt like I was up to date on class material versus when the ideas were in my head about how I could present myself to these opportunities. I took advantage of that time when I could.
I like hearing it framed that way. You know, obviously I've never been a medical student. I'm thrilled with that choice on my part. So I can't
Smart choice.
imagine, let's say you're, I know, sorry guys. Let's say you're struggling academically and you don't have that creative energy or that literally that time to go find opportunities. I think maybe that's a bit of a reality check, right? That like you got to buckle down and do the academics. And it sounds like you did just academics until you had bandwidth to do more. And so like you'll know that moment when you get there, at least based on your experience. Okay.
That's definitely true. And I'm sure that advice applies to anybody interested in a competitive specialty. More than anything, the program directors and programs care about how well you are versed in medicine, how much medicine you know. And research comes secondary to that for sure. So grades are much more important than research.
I appreciate you saying that because I know we see students who start to slip academically and then they think, "Oh, I'll CV build, I'll do more." It sounds like you've been listening. You can reinforce my regular message that academics really do come first. So I appreciate hearing that. Okay, so you were selected. Congrats. At what time in the year did you actually know what program you'd been accepted to?
I found out I was accepted to the Vanderbilt Scientist Research Training Program in February, early February, which was nice because my birthday's then. It was a nice birthday present. Um, and so it gave me plenty of time to prepare, to look into having a sublet for a summer lease. But yeah, I would say within 2 months, 2 months of me submitting my application, I knew, which was great on their part.
Wow. Tell me more about officially what program this was and what was expected of you for the experience.
Yeah, so this program was sponsored by a branch of the National Institutes of Health called NIDDK. I'm not sure of the exact abbreviation, but they cover the research areas of diabetes and obesity, digestive diseases, so GI, and kidney diseases, which all can kind of align in some sort of way. And they sponsor this scientist research training program. As far as I know, one of the bigger summer cohorts was at Vanderbilt for the summer, but we had students come for the summer symposium from Stanford, from the Joslin Diabetes Center at Harvard, from some of these really prestigious places. So it's a national program. And then at the end of the summer, you get to meet with all these other students who participate in the program at their respective satellite sites. So it's a pretty structured program. I really appreciated that.
That's amazing. And you mentioned this earlier, but I want to emphasize this further. This wasn't just for students interested in ophthalmology, right? You're applying kind of a broader topical focus to your interest in ophthalmology.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was one of the few students there interested in ophthalmology. Most, if not all, students were interested in endocrinology, internal medicine, kind of diabetes and obesity focused specialties. So this isn't something that necessarily you do if you're interested in a very niche specialty. Um, and a lot of the students there, they were also happy to, they were interested in specialties totally apart from this focus area as well. So
I'm really glad to hear that because, again, thinking of common pitfalls, I'll see students think, I want to do ophthalmology. I'm only going to Google ophthalmology summer research programs. And you can really limit yourself, or they may even do that here at UK. They'll only look for ophthalmology projects. I know we hear this from program directors all the time that you can do research in any area. All of your experiences don't have to be in your specialty of interest, or you can tailor a broad experience towards your specialty of interest. Walk me through, was that on your mind this summer? Were you trying to design something ophthalmology related, or were you focused on whatever topic you were told to study? How did you balance that?
So I kind of came in with the angle of wanting to study a complication of diabetes called diabetic retinopathy. So if you have uncontrolled diabetes for a long enough period of time, eventually it affects the retina of your eye and it can result in permanent visual loss. So that was my connection that I established in my application to be able to work in this diabetes. The program as a whole was focused on like those three: diabetes, digestive diseases, and kidney diseases. So that was how I justified my interest in ophthalmology. Um, but yeah, I had to draw that connection for sure.
That's really smart. And I would imagine that pretty much any specialty of interest a student could make an argument for its relevance to a broad experience like this.
Absolutely.
Walk me through just a day in the life. This was a full-time paid 8-week experience, but you did have to move, and I'm guessing the pay basically went towards your rent, right? You probably weren't making money.
Pretty much, pretty much. And actually, with and this can be a case for any summer program. You might have to be prepared for delayed receipt of funding, because there's a whole bunch of administrative and bureaucratic things tied with funding sometimes. But as yeah, I didn't I wasn't necessarily going anywhere for a pay or something like that. So around April, I'd figured out my sublet lease. I'd found something really nice, and then day to day, I'd say I'd spend around like it's an 8 hour day in the lab. Um, and either that or I would do some of my work remotely and then spend a remainder of the portion of the day in the lab. And basically what my day-to-day work, it wasn't necessarily working directly with mice, but working with like slides, working with slides under a microscope, and mostly working with data. Yeah.
Now, I hear from a lot of students who say, I worked in a lab as an undergrad. Please don't ever make me do that again. You either love it or you don't. Had you done that kind of lab work before? Did you feel like you enjoyed the experience or was it something you already loved? Just tell me more about that decision.
Yeah, I think I I I did work in a animal research lab in undergrad. I worked with zebrafish and rats, and I enjoyed that experience. I think there's a lot to be learned from using animal models in research. So that was something that I've never really kind of shut out ever. But I can understand where students are coming from. What I'll say is if you feel that there's a good research opportunity for you, you can learn a lot, you can get a lot out of it professionally. I wouldn't necessarily shut it out because it's related to animal work or something. You might even be able to discuss with your mentor something that not only do I not necessarily want to work with animals, but I don't have the time necessarily to keep up with animal husbandry or all the other things that are associated with wet lab work.
Yeah, that's a great point. I often, in conversations with students, am saying you don't have to do basic science anymore if you don't want to, but if you're willing to consider it, some of the most high quality experiences are in those settings, some of the ones that yield the most outcomes. And the reality is, a lot of clinical research is also data analysis, spreadsheets. Rarely is it sort of in the moment exciting clinical work quite yet. So I think that's good things to keep in mind and not shut that door, like you said.
Yeah.
Um, Everyone wants outcomes for their research experiences. I want to highlight that this was a formal competitive program, so it can go on your top 10 experiences list, go on your CV, even if you got no outcomes, which is a big plus of doing a formal program just versus just pairing up with a mentor. But I do think you got some outcomes out of this. What are you hoping to get on your CV from this experience?
So right from the beginning of the summer, what was stressed to us was that we will be producing a poster to present at a symposium, which I mentioned before. So I did that. I produced a poster and I presented it to the other students visiting from the other diabetes centers, as well as a couple of mentors who they had brought in to act as preceptors for discussion purposes. And going forward, I'm hoping to present that poster at a national conference. I recently asked my PI, and she was happy with the way I presented my poster during that symposium, so she approved me to present at a national conference. And going forward, the plan is that hopefully my contributions will even result in a publication.
That's awesome. Well done. I know that's a huge lift for any student, especially as you're going back into the classroom as an M2. How do you think you might anticipate continuing to move a project like this or any project forward while you're also in the middle of a really busy academic year? Any advice there?
So yeah, the thing about my summer research, as I kind of touched on earlier, it was mostly wet lab research, and it depended on the availability of mice, my availability to look at slides under a microscope, and a lot of things that required me to be there. Fortunately, my PI understood that after the summer, I mean, I can't really be there as often, so uh, I would stress that one of the big things with any summer experience is to develop a relationship with your principal investigator where they feel comfortable putting you on maybe any project or another project that's more conducive to your time requirements during M2 or M3 year. And that's what I did. So I'll most of my contributions to that summer work will probably be limited to the summer, but she transitioned me to some other work she's doing with some patients in Texas, some really cool work there. So that's something I'm able to do remotely now, and we still stay in touch. So I'm really glad for that, and I'd stress that developing that connection with the PI is huge.
That's awesome. And I would emphasize, I'm sure you went above and beyond there by staying in communication, asking for further opportunities. You know, you don't want to just sit back and wait for someone to ask if you want to do the next thing. You went out and said, "Hey, can we stay in touch?" Right?
Yeah, yeah. PIs are always looking for somebody hardworking and a medical student, well informed and decently well informed for that point in their career for medicine. So if you can establish that through like an in summer internship or over the course of a year, even virtually, then PIs will trust you with more research and more work.
I appreciate you phrasing that so clearly. A lot of times M1s are not necessarily quite thinking yet about the impact of just their professionalism, their networking, their responsiveness to potential mentors, but showing up, even if
Yeah.
it's for like a little baby project to begin with, then you establish trust and you get the next project. I've seen students do tons of stuff with the same PI, but you earn that by kind of getting their trust and then being handed the next thing, right?
Yeah, you're the first person that they call on eventually at some point.
That's what we want. That's awesome. All right. Now, I know that it's ridiculous for me to ask about where you're headed for residency, but I am curious, did it factor in for you to go somewhere that you might want to go for residency? Were you like trying to make connections at that institution? Anything there that you'd want to share?
Absolutely. I spent my summer at Vanderbilt and I loved Nashville. I loved Nashville and I loved the Vanderbilt University Medical Center layout as a whole. I didn't get to do too much shadowing and networking, but it did really influence. I think Vanderbilt's going to be one of my top institutions I'll apply to for residency. Um, and on that notion, if somebody does consider this kind of like uh, a research experience away from the College of Medicine, I would encourage them to consider how much they enjoy living there. If they do, try to establish those connections to be able to apply there in the future.
That's great advice. And then if I may, one broad question here, because you're such a superstar student, you're doing amazing, you're headed for a pretty competitive specialty, which I know can be daunting for our M1s. Give us just a glimpse of what all you were juggling by the end of M1 or now as an M2. You know, students are thinking, how many projects should I be a part of? Should I be doing leadership? Should I be doing service? Just for you as one N of one, M2 only, what kind of are all the balls you have in the air right now, or maybe back in the spring of M1 as one example, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I was with the Asian Pacific American Medical Student Association. I was treasurer this past year. I was also part of DSCA. I'd say overall, I wish I had like a list of all my involvements, but overall, I spend about that like 40-hour work week studying, and then maybe 10 hours per week for kind of extracurriculars and my research really ramped up during the summer. I wasn't as productive with research during M1, but like 5 to 10 hours initially, and then during the summer, kind of that full-time schedule. And I switched maybe studying to like kind of that like 10-hour review versus like full-time research.
Any other advice that you would share if you're thinking back on yourself in the fall of M1, things you're really glad you did or things you wish you'd done or you heard of others doing?
I mean, I wouldn't have been able to apply for this program if I didn't just go out on the internet and look like summer research opportunities for M1 students. I didn't even mention ophthalmology or something like that. So just go and like reach for whatever fruit is in your reach. If you feel that something is possible for you, then I mean you're at this point you're already a medical student. You've already established that you're capable of academic rigor. So go for it. Go for any opportunity that you have is
Yeah.
what I would stress.
This is so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing. If it's okay, I'll attach your name to this video so students might reach out in the future. We're super excited to see what you do next. Thank you so much, Anas.
Thank you, Dr. Sims.
Bye.
Bye.